All right, Nina from Chai Mitzvah, our amazing friend and partner. Nina Walden is the managing director of Chai Mitzvah, and she is going to lead our networking conversation this evening called Critical Conversations of Faith, Exploring Big Questions in Jewish or Multi-Faith Groups. Nina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So the first thing I want to ask you guys, and if you want, you could put it in the chat box or else you could shout it out, whichever you prefer. Have any of you ever been part of a multi-faith group like Sisters of Salam Shalom or something local that gets together and meets either you personally or with your students? I see Suzanne is nodding, but she has to chew first. Okay, what were you a member of?
The Jewish Muslim interfaith thingy. They would come to us and we would go to the mosque.
With you as an adult or with your students?
No, as an adult.
Anybody else? Sephora, you look like you were going to say something.
It wasn't recent. It was actually when I was in 8th grade. I went to a Jewish day school, and we had like a Christian school and then a group of Muslim students, and we did the same thing. We went to each other's places of worship, and I still keep in touch with some of the people, so it was impactful.
Wait. Can I add to that? I don't
Yes,
know.
please.
I don't know that Zipporah remembers this, but it's, I think, so funny and also really telling about the way that we educate our kids. So I was a chaperone and driver to one of our meetups, and we had like this half a day get together where everyone's sitting together and we're looking at maps and we're having conversations and doing icebreakers and all kinds of stuff. And when we leave, I don't know if it was Zipporah, one of the other kids was like, "Can you tell me where Palestine was?" Because they're looking at the same map, but they're calling the map different things. And they were so confused because they had never heard Israel referred to. And she's a day school kid. Like, it wasn't like a supplemental kid. So very interesting the way in which, like, what we learn from interacting with people of other faiths as well.
One of my sons started a group in college, 15 years ago, called Children of Abraham, and it really transformed his college experience. And it came as the result of, not the one I was talking about before, a different son, but it came as a result of, coming there and connecting with a young Muslim boy who they found similarities. And actually, as his senior project, he did a documentary which he called Cousins of Faith, where he followed an observant Jew and an observant Muslim and tried to show the similarities between. It could be very interesting for an interfaith group to use.
Right. Remember, we spoke about this, and I think it is, I want to get it from you because it's a very interesting idea, and I'm sure. So we can see it can be really impactful. I mean, Sephora, you still have friends. Lisa, your son made a whole movie over it. And it's interesting, the impact it can have on the students in terms of how they understand other people and how they're understood by other people, and even how they understand themselves. Because until you have to explain yourself to someone else, you might not really see aspects of your religion or your belief system or whatever it is until you kind of do it yourself. So I'm going to share the screen, and I'm going to go quickly because I know we don't have a ton of time, and I don't want to waste a lot of time. I want to have more discussion. I don't want to take a lot of time on like telling you what Chai Mitzvah is. Most of you know, but not all of you do. So I'll just go through a little bit. Chai Mitzvah is a great framework to engage teens. They're in a time of personal discovery, and we have a lot of different ways to help them process their lives through a Jewish lens by combining text to spark discussions, which we're going to look at tonight, ritual and social action. And we have 6 different tracks that we have materials for. In Jewish Journey, And I'm not going to go through all the topics because I'm really excited to talk instead with you guys, but it has things like rites of passage or interpersonal relationships or tzedakah, philanthropy. We have Musar, which is a different midah each time. Each of these are designed for like monthly meetings, but you can stretch them out. They're very flexible. You can use the parts that work for you and the parts that don't work for you, you don't have to do. They have text, they have activities, and they have all kinds of things that you can do. We have something called the Seret, the Big Ten, which is about the 10 Commandments. It's really, really interesting because it takes the 10 Commandments and it expands them. So for example, the one about being a false witness also goes into speech. It goes into Lashon Hara. It goes into how the news is covered, and a lot of different politically correct speech, all kinds of things like that. We have Mixtape, which is an arts-based curriculum, which we worked on with Matt Barr, the Bible rapper. We have 2 new ones. We have Grandparents and Beyond, which is a really fun intergenerational activities that's designed for kids to do with any older people. It's going on in a few schools now, which is great. And we have what we're going to talk about a lot tonight, which is critical conversations. So there are 5 topics in this curriculum. We're going to look at the second one. How do we reconcile faith in the presence of evil? But I'm going to tell you the others. There's what is modern day idolatry, which is lies about power. How do we reconcile faith in the presence of evil? Can science and God coexist? Is the Bible real? And why pray? And these are all amazing discussions to have with a Jewish group or with a multi-faith group, because it's not, the texts are not necessarily all Jewish. And even if they are, the Jewish text makes sense to have in this context. Another part of Chai Mitzvah is social action. You can do it in person or you can do it virtually. Usually you have something going on in your schools anyway, or in your youth groups. And there are also suggestions to inspire students in the materials. And then we have social action with social distance, which we put out when the pandemic began, with a lot of interesting ideas. Then you might be saying to yourself, how much does this cost? So the answer is nothing, but you get money for doing it. There's no cost to register. Materials are provided at no cost. You get a grant of $250 when you complete the year. And students who do this and are going to go to Israel at the end of the year of being in Chai Mitzvah can get a stipend for Israel travel, $1,000 for each student towards any trip that's 3 weeks or more, except for Route 1 students get $500. But it's not needs-based. It can be combined with other funds. And every year we help around 100 kids. Last year, not this coming summer, but last summer, all the trips were canceled, but we're honoring it this year, and those kids are going. We have about 60 kids going this year, combined with the kids who are rescheduled and the kids who did it this year. And this year is a JSU group saying thank you on their Zoom meeting, which I thought was very sweet. So let's look at the new curriculum, Critical Conversations of Faith, exploring big questions. So as we were talking about, it's a great program for Jewish groups and multi-faith groups. And as Billy Planer pointed out so well yesterday, it's more important than ever to find commonalities and get to know each other. So these big questions are really good ways to explore what we think. And I told you it's a 5-part curriculum. It's based on the book In Good Faith, Questioning Religion and Atheism, which Scott Shea, who's a founder and board president of Chai Mitzvah, wrote for adults. Each topic is designed to spark open and meaningful discussion and encourage students to think critically. So we're going to look at this one. It explores how we reconcile faith in the presence of evil. Why would God permit evil to exist? Which is a troubling question for a lot of people. What does the Bible teach about evil? And even if the Bible rationally describes evil, the question remains, why create evil at all? So those are some of the things we discuss in this. And the first thing we say to the students is, we all have our own beliefs about God. Some of us may believe in God, some of us may not. We're not here to change anyone's opinion or belief, but to enjoy an open discussion and share. So let's take a closer look at this. I'm showing you this page. It's a sample page from the digital booklet, which is of course available to you at no cost. We're going to go through the whole booklet today, and I'm going to hopefully have enough time to stop and we can have conversations. And what I want to say, you don't have to do the conversations in order. You don't have to do all of them. Do the ones that work with your students or that are interesting to you. Do them in the order that'll get them talking most comfortably. And it depends on your group, it's very flexible. So, and it is good to do the booklets in order. You'll see tonight something that happened in the first booklet I actually brought in because I feel like it helps you to understand the second booklet. And there are 5 of them. You could do 5 sessions. You could do 10 sessions if you divide them up, however you like. So I have this page here because I want you to notice the word Hillel there in orange. There are links to stuff like that. So that if you want to learn a little more, you can do it quickly and easily. So, and also each booklet also has an annotated PowerPoint. So you can use whichever option you want to make it really easy to teach. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so this is the first page, and you can see there's always an introduction, a text, and a conversation. That's always a Chai Mitzvah method, and that's how we follow it. So this page has the first text, and each text is going to be in the PowerPoint. So here's a PowerPoint slide. The first text here talks about the definition of evil, right? So let's look at the PowerPoint, okay? So evil in a general sense is defined by what it is not, the opposite or absence of good. Evil, the Hebrew word for evil is ra. The word appears more than 600 times in the Bible and in prophetic literature. It's used mainly to describe harmful behavior towards others, all of which are described as evil. For example, bearing false witness, rejecting the judgment of an established court, adultery, kidnapping, enslavement. The word ra is regularly used in the Bible to refer to transgressions of these rules, and that of the rules that create social justice and a good society. So what you're learning is that social justice and a good society is defined by not doing what's ra. Here's the next one. Now we're going to look at the slide that corresponds to text 2, the what is good. Let me see if I can move my things because it's like covering. Can somebody read what it says? Because my thing is covering it.
A suitable translation of the word good, tov, might be complete, completed, or completeness.
Thank you. In English, we might translate that as functional. Like only animals that were tov could be used for temple sacrifices, because if they were tov, they were unblemished and acceptable to God. When God completed the world, he declared he or she, God declared it tov ma'od, very complete, very functional. Or in short, God no longer had to fool around with it. Nature was complete and could operate on its own. Now humanity could partner with God to appreciate and witness God's greatest act, creation. But for this to occur, it was necessary that evil exists in the world, that humanity has the ability to reject that evil and freely choose good. You may agree or may not agree with this. So the question that goes with these 2 texts is, do you have any personal experiences of evil? And how have these experiences affected your faith in God? And I want to take a minute to discuss because I think it's interesting. So
Can I just ask you a technical question?
Yeah.
How do you get from like the booklet to the PowerPoint? Like you had a booklet page with the link, but then all of a sudden you were in a PowerPoint. So what's the relationship there?
Great question. You can kind of use either one. I mean, they're given to you separately. I put them together so you could see them. And the thing is, like the booklet you can use on a smart board or on a tablet, and the PowerPoint you can also do that with. You could have the booklet on a PowerPoint and booklet on a tablet, and the smartboard had the PowerPoint. You can kind of do it however you want to. It just depends what you want to use.
But it's 2 different.
Yeah, you get both of them. Yeah, they're 2 different things. I just put them together. So let's just find one brave person who can tell me an experience of evil, if you've ever experienced one. It's a hard question. It's interesting. You know what? We'll hold it because we go later to someone else who has an experience of evil. And I think you'll find it interesting. like really interesting, because we go towards the end, we talk about, we have an Elie Wiesel quote, and we have a Jonathan Sachs quote, and some of that really clarifies it out. But I'm going to go back, kind of go through the booklet just, and as I said, you can go through the booklet like not in order for this very reason, that there's different stuff that you might or might not want to look at. Okay, so everybody knows this Hillel quote. The Bible's view of evil is not supernatural, it's rational. And this, I think, is really important. In order to determine whether we've crossed the threshold from neutral strategy to evil action, you have to take into account consent. Is consent presence or absence? And I think that's important. In order for people to fulfill their personal, physical, emotional, existential needs without doing harm to others, they need to be willing and mindful of others. And consent between two individuals or two groups then is a rational prior condition of following the golden rule. We're not even sure that students have heard the words the golden rule, so we explain it: do unto others what you'd have done to you. And it's intended to prevent people from doing things to others that they wouldn't want done by coercion, by force, or by violence. So a person who willingly gives you something isn't a victim of sex. If two persons willingly consent to sexual relationship, neither of them is a victim of rape. But if a person goes along with sex because of an unequal power relationship in which one party is afraid to dissent, then that's coercion, and that's not the same thing. So the kinds of conversations you'd have with this golden rule with Hillel is, does popularity and power make us more vulnerable to ignoring the golden rule? If two people do something they know is wrong, but both consent, does the golden rule apply? How does that relate to modern day idolatry? And because we teach idolatry in the first one as lies about power, you can see how that relates. And I'm gonna show you a page from the book before, mainly because I really like a song that's in it. The other thing is, you can look at how the golden rule can be applied to like the news today, and how outcomes might change if people actually didn't do things, or if countries didn't do things that they didn't want done to them. So this is a page from the book before it. And it has a conversation that relates to the question we just talked about. I'm showing it to you because you can see what the students would have had before, and also because it has a link to the song Wristband by Paul Simon. Has anyone ever heard it? It's like a great song. It's about 5 years old, and it's really scary the way he wrote it, because it's about how it's a nice Paul Simon song. This particular video, which you have a link to, looks like a series screen, and it's funny, and it's got all the words. It's really cool. But the thing that's interesting, which is a very Paul Simon thing, he starts talking about how he accidentally locks himself out of the club where he's playing. And when he goes to get back in, the bouncer won't let him in because he doesn't have a wristband. And then he starts saying how the riots started slowly with the homeless and the lowly, and they spread into the heartland. Towns that can't afford a wristband, or towns that never get a wristband, kids that can't afford the cool brand, and their anger is a shorthand because I'll never have a wristband. And if you don't have a wristband, you can't get through the door. So it's a very interesting, like, I just love it. And I'll put the link to it in the chat box before we go. And that's also something that brings up the question of power in society. Okay, so I'm going on. This text is completely far away from Paul Simon. It's attributed to Epicurus by David Hume. And there have to be links for supplemental information here because it's not something a lot of people know about. But it's an interesting thought. Is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he or she's not omnipotent. Is God able but not willing? Then God's malevolent. Is God able and willing? Then where does evil come from? And if God's neither able nor willing, then why call God God? So that's an interesting conversation. Is God willing to prevent evil? Kids can describe that. You know, it's an interesting conversation. I'm going to skip to my all-time favorite text, which is from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, God at Auschwitz. And it says, when I first stood at Auschwitz-Birkenau, the question that haunted me was not, where was God? God was in the command, you shall not murder. God was in the words, you shall not oppress a stranger. God was saying to humanity, your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. God did not stop the first humans eating forbidden fruit. He did not stop Cain committing murder. He did not stop the Egyptians enslaving the Israelites. God does not save us from ourselves. That, according to the Talmud, is why creating man was such a risk that the angels advised against it. The question that haunts me after the Holocaust, as it does today, in this new age of chaos, is, where is man? So that is one of my favorites. And then we talk about hate. The Bible only describes one kind of hate, and that's the hate of evil itself. Hate's defined as an intense or passionate dislike for someone or a strong aversive reaction to something. And some questions that might come from this are, what has your been experience with hate in your life? What would make you or has made you hate something or someone? And I'm going to skip on, because I really do want to have a conversation at the end of this. So I'm going to kind of go through the other quotes. We'll finish off with two very important texts in a conversation that I'd love for us to have. The first one's Elie Wiesel. I can't actually see it because the things are in front of it. Can somebody read it?
Yeah, I got it. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. To the indifferent person, his or her neighbor are of no consequence. Their hidden or even visible anguish is of no interest. Indifference reduces the other to an abstraction.
Thank you. And then the last one we have is Martin Luther King Jr. We must learn that passively to accept an unjust system is to cooperate with that system and thereby to become a participant in its evil. So what we like to talk about here is, have you ever witnessed evil and stepped up? What was the outcome? Have you ever witnessed evil and not stepped up? Why? And one of the things I think is important also to talk about with teens is you should not put yourself in danger to step up against evil. You should definitely step up against evil, but if you see someone mugging someone, don't run in there. However, call 911. So let's sit back and think for a second. If you've ever seen evil and stepped up.
Evil is such a strong word, it's like evil in my mind is really reserved for like the killer of George Floyd, that's just like evil. And, I've never experienced personally, thank God, evil in my life. I've experienced people behaving badly and doing things that I think are wrong, but evil, I don't know, it's just such a loaded word. So it's a little hard for me to wrap my head around.
That's an excellent reaction to this, which I've never heard before, but I love it. So let's take a little bit of a step back and say, have you ever witnessed something that seemed very wrong to you? And what did you do when you saw that?
As a teacher, I'm mandated to report things in my state. So if I see things, I would do it without being mandated, but there are times where you have to step up to save a child. You have to, do what you have to do because a child is in a bad situation.
I once saw a guy in a parking lot hitting his child, like really, like beating on his kid. And I did not know what to do. And I was with John, and John walked up to him and said, like, you're beating up your kid. This is like not right. And the guy said, it's none of your business. It's my kid. And I wonder if there was something more we should have done. Sometimes you just don't know what to do. So it's an interesting conversation. Has anybody else ever seen something that they knew was wrong? And I'm really thinking, Susan, because evil is a really hard word, but something that you absolutely knew was wrong.
Um, we were in a really weird situation. Sephora probably doesn't remember, but we were in San Francisco for my brother's wedding, and the hotel that we were in had inside like hallways, and we heard somebody screaming, 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 and came out to see a naked woman like running, screaming, I've been raped, I've been raped, I've been raped. And like you see all these people coming, like looking at this woman, like she's obviously been traumatized by whatever happened to her. And you just see people watching her, like not doing anything. So we picked up the phone and immediately called 911. And somebody who she was very like in close proximity to said, come here, like come into our room, let us take you. But you know, like there were so many people who were just like there to watch the spectacle, because it was so confusing and so terrifying and just disoriented. So there was clearly evil happening. We don't really know all that occurred, but really all we could do was pick up the phone and call 911, because you know, it's like we have kids, little kids with us. How much do you get involved? Do we know who she's running away from, whether that person has a gun or a knife? Like you don't know. So yeah, it was scary.
It's interesting that you say that. And you know, it's interesting too, finding the way the conversation's going, because I'm thinking with teens, it's going to be more like they know there's injustice in the world and they did something just, you know, um, like they might think that, you know, being homeless is a bad thing. You know, the fact that there are homeless people is maybe an evil. And that, you know, providing food is stepping up, and stepping over the person lying in the street is maybe not stepping up, and why you would do that. And we really took it to a much deeper level, which is interesting. And Erica, that must have been like really frightening, because that's, you know.
Well, like Susan said, like when you think of evil, it's not just like someone behaving badly, like it's evil. There was clearly something evil underneath what was going on. But hopefully our kids haven't had those experiences, but they hear about friends of theirs being raped, or, you know, being drugged, or being in situations that, you know, being pulled over and having a gun pointed at them. Like they actually have these experiences, which is really, I think, you know, shocking, but I think we need to be prepared for them to bring some of that stuff up in these deep conversations.
I think you're right. My kids all experienced stuff like that, and I didn't find out till they were like grown up, because they didn't want to get me upset. But it's good to have a forum where kids can bring this out and deal with it and think about how to handle it. It's very interesting. So that is basically, I think is our time up, or do we have time?
We have until like 7:45. I have a question
Oh,
about
yay.
the curriculum itself, though. Is
Yeah.
time, or should I wait?
No. This is good. I was just gonna say, let's do some questions.
Okay. So I know before you had to like sign up to do it, and then it had to be like a year-long commitment in order to qualify for the grant and the stipend and all of that. Has that changed, or like can we use bits and pieces of a few of the curriculum? How would it work?
That's a great question. So in order to get the stipend, we do want them to be like a group, which means they do a whole curriculum. But this is 5 parts, and you might not want to do every part of it, and that's okay. That's actually true with all of them, and you might want to do them not in the order that they're there, but as long as you do it, like this could be a mini semester, maybe it's 5 weeks. It would depend on how you want to do it. As long as you do the whole thing, you are eligible for the stipend. And as long as the kids participate in the whole thing, and if they're going to Israel that following summer, they can get the stipend. They just have to fill out an application. But that was a great question. And since we also have some other time, I want to say also, we have this grandparents curriculum, which also you can do a group and the same thing applies. Are there any other questions?
Well, you had started off by talking about an interfaith venue. Is it an expectation that this will be done in an interfaith venue, or can it be done in the context of a Hebrew High class?
It can be done in the context of a Hebrew High class. It's just that it's been done a couple of times, and it's been done without being interfaith, and it's been done interfaith. And it doesn't really matter. It's just interesting because it's an interesting conversation to have. And we just happen to have done that a couple of times and it worked nicely. So I just kind of wanted to bring it up.
And the Jewish journeys I'm not familiar with. Is that relatively new?
You're going to laugh because you're real familiar with it. It just has a new name. It used to be standard curriculum and nobody knew what standard meant. So we gave it another name that nobody would know.
Okay.
It's still like rites of passage, tzedakah, philanthropy, gratitude, those topics.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
And if we want them, we just go where to request them?
Two things I want to put in the chat box. One is where you go to request them. And the other is this great Paul Simon song that I just like so much. So I'm going to put both of those in the chat box. Let's see if I have the link here somewhere. It's very, here we go. This is the Paul Simon song. Hold on, is my keyboard on? Yes. Okay, I can Command C. Okay, so this is the one that was in the curriculum that I just thought was interesting that I wanted to give you. And then the more important one is Chai Mitzvah. Oh, whoops, I'm using, you see, I have too many A's in that because I have a new keyboard. Okay. ChaiMitzvah.org, and all the information you want is there, but you can also contact me because when you get a ChaiMitzvah.org, you might be looking around. So any questions, I'm always happy to answer. Nina at ChaiMitzvah.org.
Nina, while you're typing that, you guys, in the swag bag, Nina has included some sample curriculum, I think from both the interfaith one that we talked about and the grandparents one. They're both in the swag bag. So just make sure to look that up too.
Yeah. I think actually only grandparents is in there. But I actually would love to send you guys, we have who's in here, right? I can send them a sample of critical conversation. And in fact, I won't send you the one we just did. I'll send you the one that we didn't just do. So it'll be more interesting. Any other questions? All right, well, I'll tell you real quickly about grandparents since we have like 5 minutes. So it's really for every age. So if anybody is also has like a school with kids of younger kids as well, it works for them too. It's being done right now in 3 middle schools in Northern California and a BBYO group. These are our pilots. It's going really well. And I'm also doing it with like a group of grandparents who then bring it back to their kids, and people are doing it as like dyads, like a grandparent and their kids. But it works really nicely in a school. A lot of schools want to get grandparents involved, it seems. I've noticed now that I'm a grandparent, they really are reaching out to me from Golda Ak Academy. And what I do is I watch a Kabbalat Shabbat, and maybe my grandson who is 5 and is in pre-K will like float across the screen for a second. And this is like a actually really great things that you can do. Anyone who's familiar with Chai Mitzvah and knows the curriculum knows that they'll have things in here about rites of passage and tzedakah and philanthropy and Israel and Judaism and the environment and like all kinds of different interesting stuff. And they're like age icons, so you know what's good for your kids. but also the kids will look through and see what they want to do. And what the school in California is doing is they have a bunch of kids and their grandparents come like every Tuesday to a Zoom meeting, and they love it. And they break into breakout groups and they come back. And the BBYO group is the kids are meeting together. They're looking at the booklet, deciding what they want to do, going back and doing it with their grandparents, and then coming back and talking about it. So there are a lot of different ways to use it. And the thing is, so we want to have 1,000 grandparents participating by September 12th, which is National Grandparents Day. So everything is absolutely free until then. And of course, to teens, they're free anyway, but to other people, they're not usually. But that's it. So I am glad that it sounds good to you, Sarah. I'm so glad. I always love to listen to you guys and see what is interesting and learn more about your students and delve into that, because it's really interesting and really good to see what's going on. And while I'm at it, I have 2 seconds. I have to say, I got into Jewish education like, I don't know, 40 years ago or more, because I'm very old. And the reason I did it was because at that time it was so boring and so not engaging. And I see Sarah's nodding because we remember this. And I love that I was able to do all this stuff, but I also love all the stuff that's going on now that is so creative and so engaging, and like it's a different world, which I think is great.
Well, Nina, thank you so much. Everyone knows how to reach you. I definitely want to consider getting a few of these to maybe intersperse with my Hebrew High program. I don't know why I didn't think of it last year, but it's never too late.
It's good.
So I definitely want to reach out to do that as well.